Banwa, attentive souls and seekers of true communication. I am Naomi, and from this space where silence is not emptiness, but an invitation to deep listening, I warmly and sincerely welcome you to Minimalist Charm. Today, I want us to delve into a subtle but immensely powerful art, one that we often forget in our noisy and fast-paced world. The art of listening to what is not said, of finding eloquence in stillness. Together we will explore the Japanese concept of Seijaku, that deep and active tranquility, and discover how its wisdom can transform the way we communicate, connect with others, and ultimately understand ourselves. I remember a conversation with my grandmother Akiko. I was young, and I was telling her with great agitation about a problem that was troubling me, filling the air with a torrent of words, complaints, and fears. She listened to me in silence with calm and deep attention, her eyes fixed on mine, nodding occasionally. When I finally ran out of breath, exhausted by my own monologue, I expected advice, a solution, an avalanche of comforting words. Instead, she remained silent for a few more moments, a silence that was neither uncomfortable nor empty, but filled with unspoken understanding. Then, in a soft voice, she asked me a single question, a simple but incredibly insightful question that led me to see my problem from a completely new perspective and find my own answer. In that moment, I understood that my grandmother's silence had not been passivity, but an active form of listening, a space that allowed me to hear myself and find my own clarity. That was my first conscious encounter with the power of Seijaku. In our modern society, we often value verbal eloquence above all else. We fill conversations with our own opinions, interrupt before the other person finishes, and fear silences as if they were an uncomfortable void that must be filled at all costs. In the digital world, communication is even more fragmented and noisy. Instant messages, emojis, eye-catching headlines, a constant flow of information that rarely allows us to pause for reflection or truly deep listening. As a result, we often feel misunderstood, disconnected, and our relationships suffer from a lack of authentic communication. Japanese minimalism, with its emphasis on essence, intention, and the elimination of the superfluous, offers us an invaluable guide to rediscovering the power of eloquent silence. It teaches us that sometimes the most important words are those that are not spoken, and that true connection is born not from noise, but from shared stillness. Today, I want to share with you some reflections and practices inspired by this philosophy, to learn how to cultivate Seijaku in our lives and listen with our hearts, thus discovering a new dimension of understanding and connection in a world that desperately needs more silence and less noise. One of the first and most transformative lessons Seijaku offers us is the art of active and empathetic listening, learning to silence our own internal dialogue in order to truly receive the other person's message, both verbal and nonverbal. Often, when someone speaks to us, instead of listening with full attention, we are busy formulating our response, judging what is being said, or waiting for our turn to speak. This mental noise prevents us from genuinely connecting with the person in front of us and understanding the entirety of their message. Practicing Seijaku in conversation involves creating an inner space of silence and receptivity, where we can welcome the other person's words without interruption, paying attention not only to what they say, but also to how they say it, their tone of voice, their body language, the emotions underlying their words. In Japanese culture, the ability to read the air, kuki wo yomu, to perceive nonverbal cues and implicit feelings, is often valued more than simple verbal eloquence. I think of Javier, a young executive at a company in Mexico City who, despite being very intelligent and articulate, had difficulties in his professional and personal relationships. His colleagues and friends often felt unheard by him, as he tended to interrupt, offer quick solutions before understanding the problem, or divert the conversation to his own experiences. I feel like people are pulling away from me, Naomi, and I don't understand why, he confessed to me in frustration. I suggested that he start practicing silent listening. In his next conversations, he should consciously try not to interrupt, maintain eye contact, and simply listen with the intention of understanding, not responding immediately. He should ask open-ended questions to delve deeper into what the other person was feeling or thinking, rather than imposing his own point of view. At first, he found it incredibly difficult. He felt a constant urge to jump in. But with practice, he began to notice a change. "It's amazing, Naomi," he told me. "When I shut up, people open up so much more. I discover things I never imagined before. My relationships have improved dramatically, and I feel like I'm truly connecting with people for the first time." Active, silent listening is not passivity. It is an act of deep respect and generosity that opens the door to much richer and more authentic communication. This ability to listen to others is complemented by the courage to embrace silences in conversation, recognizing them not as uncomfortable voids, but as necessary pauses for reflection, assimilation, and the emergence of deeper understanding. In many Western cultures, silences in conversation often generate anxiety. We rush to fill them with trivial words, with nervous comments, for fear that they will be interpreted as a lack of interest, boredom, or tension. However, in the Japanese tradition, silence, chinmoku, is often considered an integral and meaningful part of communication. Silence can indicate respect, deep reflection, tacit agreement, or even an emotion too intense to be expressed in words. Learning to be comfortable with silence, to allow pauses to breathe, can greatly enrich our interactions. Isabel, a psychologist in Madrid, told me that in her therapy sessions, she often struggled with the temptation to fill her patients' silences with questions or interpretations. She feared they would feel uncomfortable or think she didn't know what to say. However, as she explored the concept of Seijaku, she began to experiment with allowing those silences to linger a little longer. She discovered that it was often in those moments of stillness that her patients reached deeper understandings, that repressed emotions emerged, or that they found their own words to express what was really happening to them. "Silence has become one of my most powerful therapeutic tools, Naomi," she shared with me. "I no longer fear it. I welcome it as a sacred space where true healing can occur." In our everyday conversations, we can also learn to value silence. When someone tells us something important, instead of rushing to respond, we can pause, breathe, and allow their words to resonate within us. That silence can convey much more support and understanding than a hasty response. Seijaku also invites us to cultivate introspection and self-awareness through personal silence, creating spaces in our lives to listen to our own inner voice, our needs, our desires, and our intuitive wisdom. In a world that constantly bombards us with external stimuli and other people's opinions, it's easy to lose touch with ourselves, with what we really feel and think. The noise outside often drowns out our inner compass. Regularly dedicating time to silence and stillness, whether through meditation, solitary walks in nature, or simply moments of distraction-free disconnection, is essential for reconnecting with our essence, listening to the messages of our body and soul, and making decisions that are more aligned with our true selves. Consider the practice of zazen, Zen sitting meditation, which is fundamentally an exercise in sitting quietly with oneself, observing the flow of one's own consciousness without judgment. I met Daniel, a talented musician from Buenos Aires, who felt creatively blocked and disconnected from his passion. He spent hours consuming other artists' music, reading reviews, comparing himself, but when he tried to compose, his mind went blank or filled with doubts. I suggested that he incorporate periods of creative silence into his daily routine. Moments when he would step away from all external influences, turn off the music, his cell phone, his computer, and simply sit with his instrument in silence, without the pressure to create anything, just allowing himself to be, listen to the silence, and see what emerged from that inner space. At first, he found it difficult. His mind sought stimulation. But gradually, in those moments of stillness, melodies, ideas, and emotions began to emerge that he felt came from a very deep and authentic place within himself. "It's as if the silence has cleared the channel, Naomi," he told me. "I've started listening to my own music again, the music that comes from my soul, not from imitation or comparison. Spend time each day in silence with yourself. Listen to your heartbeat, the rhythm of your breathing. What is your body telling you? What does your spirit long for? In silence, we often find the most important answers. The wisdom of Seijaku also manifests itself in the ability to communicate more concisely, precisely, and meaningfully, choosing our words carefully and recognizing that sometimes less is more. In a culture that often values verbosity and flowery eloquence, Japanese minimalism reminds us of the power of the right word, of essential expression. A haiku, with its brevity and ability to evoke deep images and emotions with just 17 syllables, is a perfect example of this expressive economy. When we speak less, but with greater intention, our words carry more weight and are listened to more attentively. The silence that precedes and follows an important word can amplify its impact. I think of Laura, an executive in Lima, Peru, who tended to talk a lot in work meetings, giving long speeches and often repeating ideas for fear of not being heard or not seeming sufficiently prepared. However, she noticed that her colleagues often tuned out or missed the main message. I suggested that she practice essential communication. Before speaking, she should take a moment to clarify in her mind the key point she wanted to convey. She should eliminate unnecessary words and rambling. She should learn to use pauses and silence to emphasize her ideas. At first I felt vulnerable speaking less, Naomi, she confessed. But I found that my contributions are now much more impactful and respected. People listen to me more attentively, and my ideas are better understood. I've learned that clarity and conciseness are much more powerful than verbiage. Before speaking, ask yourself, is this really necessary? Is it clear? Does it add value? Sometimes the most powerful message is the one delivered with the fewest words, but with the most intention. Finally, Seijaku teaches us the importance of finding and cultivating spaces of physical and mental stillness in our environment and in our daily lives, creating havens of peace where we can recharge and reconnect with serenity, even in the midst of urban chaos. Just as a carefully designed Japanese garden, with its elements of water, stone, and vegetation arranged in harmony, can be an oasis of tranquility in the middle of a bustling city, we too can create small sanctuaries of silence in our homes, in our workplaces, and even in our own habits. It can be a quiet reading corner, a moment to enjoy a cup of tea in silence, the practice of turning off electronic devices an hour before bed, or simply the conscious choice to walk down quieter streets. Miguel, a young student in Santiago, Chile, who lived in a small, noisy apartment near a main avenue, felt constantly stressed and had difficulty concentrating. I suggested that he try to create a Seijaku microclimate in his own room, that he use noise-canceling headphones to study or meditate, that he add plants to bring in a touch of nature and absorb some of the sound, that he spend a few minutes each day tidying up and clearing his visual space, and that he find moments to escape to the nearby park and simply sit under a tree. Those small changes have made a big difference, Naomi, she told me. Even though the noise of the city is still out there, I've learned to create my own islands of calm, and that has given me a sense of control and peace that I didn't have before. We can't always control the noise of the outside world, but we can cultivate stillness within ourselves and in the spaces we inhabit. Actively seek out those moments and places that allow you to disconnect from the din and connect with the restorative silence. My dear friends, Seijaku, that deep and eloquent tranquility is not a passive absence of sound, but an active presence of peace, listening, and deep connection. In a world that constantly shouts at us, demands that we talk incessantly, and fears emptiness, rediscovering the power of silence is a revolutionary and deeply healing act. It allows us to listen more clearly to others, to ourselves, and to the subtle wisdom that emanates from life itself. By learning to listen to what is not said, by embracing pauses in our conversations, by cultivating silent introspection, by communicating more concisely, and by creating oases of stillness in our lives, we not only reduce stress and anxiety, but also open the door to deeper understanding, more authentic relationships, and creativity that flourishes in the fertile ground of inner silence. Seijaku teaches us that true communication and true wisdom often reside not in the abundance of words, but in the quality of our listening and the depth of our stillness. As a beautiful Zen proverb that my grandmother Akiko used to meditate on in her moments of contemplation says, Shinjaku mokunen. This phrase, which evokes the idea of deep silence and absorbed meditation, reminds us that it is in the stillness of the heart and mind that we find the true essence of things and the connection to the transcendent. May we all find in the eloquent silence of Seijaku a refuge, a guide, and an inexhaustible source of peace and wisdom. I sincerely hope that these reflections on the power of Japanese Seijaku have inspired you to seek and cultivate more silence and deep listening in your own lives. If these ideas have sparked a light within you, I invite you with great joy to join our community here at Encanto Minimalista. Subscribe to the channel to continue exploring these paths of serenity, awareness, and authentic connection together. And if this message has brought you a moment of calm, a new perspective on communication, or an impulse to embrace silence, please give us a like. Your support helps us immensely to bring these seeds of silent wisdom to more souls who may be longing for a respite from the noise of the world. Now, as always, I would love to read your thoughts, experiences, and intentions. Comment below on which way of practicing Seijaku resonates most with you right now, or what small step you are willing to take this week to cultivate more silence and deep listening in your life. Right? I hear the eloquent silence if you feel inspired to embrace this path of conscious communication and inner peace. Thank you so much for your presence, your attention, and your courageous willingness to listen beyond words. May you find in silence the clearest of voices and the deepest of connections. Mata connections. Mata connections.